You ready?
Yep.
Brake lights.
Good.
Left turn signal.
Yep.
Right turn signal.
Yep.
Uh-oh. Headlights. Or park lights.
Like, yep.
Reverse lights.
Good. Is that it?
Are there more lights back there?
I don't know. Take off lights.
All right, wiring's complete. This is how we got there.
The No Name Nationals is fast approaching, and we will be selling limited edition extra parts shirts in the pits. So come say hi and get yourself one.
And a huge shout out to my daughter for drawing the truck that we used on the shirt. She did an amazing job.
If you can't make it to Sykeston or you don't want to wait, you can get this version in the link below. Thank you as always for all of your kind comments and support.
It's time to start getting the wires ran that we need so we can make this big block run again. The first thing I have to do is I have to mount the battery so that I can start running power and ground to everything. So we're going to start in the back, and I'm not just going to set the camera up and do a time lapse because I don't think that'll be very interesting. So I'm going to mount it and then I'll show you what I did. There you go. It's all mounted. 4 5/16 bolts in our aluminum bracket. I think that'll be just fine. Give it the shake test. Yep, the whole truck shakes. So the next thing we need to do, since we are relocating the battery to the back of the truck and it's not in the factory location, we have to build or install a kill switch that will kill the electrical system. And I've gone back and forth. I know I've talked about it back and forth, and I've decided that the easiest, best solution is going to be to switch the ground side. Now I'm going to hook this up so not only will it isolate the battery, but it'll also isolate the alternator so that the truck will die and there will be no live electrical system provided the ground hasn't pierced somewhere between the switch and the battery and grounded that way. But in that case, the positive would have done it and we'd have had just as much trouble. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a bracket. I'm going to mount my kill switch kind of up here level with the bed, not interfering with tailgate in case I ever want to put it on for any reason. I'm just going to take a piece of aluminum, bend a 90 in it, and probably hook it right here to the bedside, probably up here, and the switch will be just above the bed. There's our battery kill switch. It has this a little on and off here, but I think I'm gonna have Amber make me some stickers on her Cricut for on and off so that it's a little bit bigger. Sorry about the focus there. I figure you guys are tired of watching me file and bend aluminum, so I didn't include that this time. If you're not tired of it, let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to include it from now on. But there's off, there's on. Now we just need to start running our battery cables. And like I said, we're gonna do the ground shut off on this, but we're gonna make sure that it kills the entire electrical system no matter what. Next step is to run a ground cable from the battery to our switch. For our battery cables, we're just gonna use some cable that I had laying around, mostly because, well, it's free. And I'm just looking on here. So this is 2-aught copper, 100% copper wire. And if you're gonna reuse old cable, I would recommend first thing you need to do is cut off the end of it just a little bit and make sure it's nice and clean copper down in there. You don't want to have a bunch of corrosion in your battery cables when you start out. This is nice and clean, so we're going to go ahead and use it. The first cable we need is 48 inches. That's going from the battery to our switch, so we're going to measure out 48 inches. Right there. And if you're doing battery cables, a set of these cutters is kind of invaluable. And I know this isn't black, but we're going to use black shrink wrap, so it kind of looks black. Or it identifies the end of it anyway. And then I'm also going to be covering all of my battery cables with this, I don't know, it's like the Chinese finger trap stuff that fishing rods, if you have like rod sleeves for your fishing rods, kind of the same thing. It's really nice, it's stretchy, and it's pretty durable as far as abrasion resistance goes. So I'm just going to get enough of this to completely cover my cable. And it's pretty expandable and it works really nice. A lot of the factories use this when they're building the original wiring harnesses. I just picked this up on Amazon, it's pretty cheap. If I remember, we'll throw a link in the description below. Too far. For our crimping duties, we're just gonna use, this is an old, I believe it's Blue Point brand hammer crimper. You just lock it up. And then on your lugs, if you look at them, most of them are marked. So that's a 4/0. I wasn't sure what size this battery cable was. So we want our 2/0 by 3/8 terminal. We're just gonna use this as a gauge to see just how far we need to strip this back. When you're stripping it, be careful you don't cut the wires because they're thin and they cut really easy, especially on this quality welding cable, which is the other reason that I'm using this. I actually ordered some stuff off of Amazon that was more suited size-wise, but when it got here, I didn't realize until it got here, I inadvertently ordered, it's like copper clad wire. It's aluminum with copper on the outside of it, and I don't like the idea of aluminum wiring in a pickup that's gonna potentially or absolutely have a lot of vibration, because aluminum is very good at getting brittle and work hardened as it gets bent and straightened back out. So we just got this plastic jacket in here that we got to get off. Then we're just going to check and make sure we stripped this far enough, and I didn't, so we'll go a little bit further. Okay, and then we're just going to insert our terminal over the end, and we're making sure we capture all of these little tiny wires so we don't lose any strands when we put this on here. And if you look around, should be none sticking out. We're fully bottomed out. For this one, it won't matter. I do recommend, if you're doing this, to try to line up your cables so you don't have to twist the cable. Makes it easier for routing and things like that. And then you just got to have a good solid surface to hammer on. The corner of this bench should be good. Just hammer down until it gets solid. And then if I have room, which I don't think I'm going to, yeah, I'm not going to on this one. I do like to try to do a double crimp on these sometimes. So I think I'll get it right. I can get it right there. Just ensures it's good and crimped and it's not going to come off. And then our shrink wrap will seal this or hold it and keep it from fraying on the end. So let me grab my heat gun. We're going to pull our jacket up, not so it's touching the copper because we don't want to have a place for water intrusion. But we're going to get it close enough so that when we put our shrink wrap on, it just gets caught in the edge of that. Now, when you're shrinking this wire with this plastic right here, I find it's easier to not use my diffuser. That helps me keep from melting my abrasion sleeve. This takes quite a bit of heat to shrink this big shrink wrap. All right, and we have our first connection all done. On this side, I'm gonna go ahead and install the shrink wrap over the top of this first. I just think it's gonna make things a little easier. And then we'll pull that back just a little bit so we have room to strip this one. Line up our mark where we want to strip it. Slide our connector on. Again, being careful not to lose any of the strands out of there. And so for this one, we want this end to be on the battery, and it's going to be flat on the battery like that. And then this end's going to loop up, come down the bed rail, and get installed on our battery switch kind of like that. So we'll hold it right there. We got a nice good crimp. It looks like it moved around a little bit, so it actually got a double crimp in one try there. And again, we want to leave some of the insulation of the actual wire exposed so the shrink wrap can seal to it and not get caught up by all these little braids. Put that over and shrink it. There's our first battery cable all done. Our second battery cable needs to be 48 inches long, but this time we're going to put a 5/16 lug on one end for our bolt through the frame. See what happens when you strip too much? Now we have a mess. I don't really know how this is going to end up on the frame down there, but I'm going to guess it's going to be something like that. So we're going to crimp it right there. There's that wire. Now that we have our ground wire hooked up, passing through the bed and right down there to a good solid ground that's nice and clean on the frame, and I'll put some type of corrosion inhibitor over the top of that so that that stays a nice good ground. It's time to start running our positive battery cables. We're just going to come out of the battery, go through the bed, and then we're going to come right along the frame here, and then go up underneath our console. I'm going to get that kind of ran and show you guys what I did. So we're going to bring our power wire right down here inside the console. That way it's not out in the open. We have a good power distribution point inside the console where we can run all of our power wires. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use this All-Star Performance bulkhead for power wire. And these come in red too, but red was like $4 more expensive and you're not even going to be able to see it. So we'll just know that black on this is the power. I'm going to get the hole drilled right there where we're going to go, and we'll get that installed. Now we've got our MSD plug all wired up, and I just wired this up. This is the standard pin layout for like the 6ALN MSD box that came with this plug, and I just do that because then if I need to swap it out, I know what the pin configuration is. And depending on how everything goes, I might actually build an extra one. I probably won't. Got our power and our ground. This will be directly, basically battery. This is going to get grounded to the frame. This is going to get ran to our pass-through and underneath the console. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drill out the 6 holes for all of our wires coming off this fuse panel. And then I will drill 6 holes here, actually probably 7, and I'll drill another one up here for our power and ground wires to come up to our fuse panel, and then all of our wires to go out. And then this piece is basically ready to be bolted back in so I can start running all these wires. All of our holes are drilled. I countersunk these out so that my grommets will fit because they won't go over this 1/8 inch, so I just drilled them from both sides so that the ridge in there is not 1/8 inch, and then the grommets will fit in there. Now we're done with this, and I'm not going to put this back in just yet because I need to wire up the relay box that goes to all of our switches, and all that wiring has to pass through the console. This is the 120 amp relay that I'm going to use to basically kill power to the entire system. So what's going to happen is I'm going to mount this up under the dash where it's kind of hidden, and I'm going to power it with the run position of the key switch. So the key switch in the, well, as soon as I figure out what's wrong with that. I guess I have to figure that out. The key switch in the run position will activate this relay, and then this relay will send power down to our fuse panels. So the key is basically going to be like another master cutoff. We'll still have our ignition switch over here that'll turn the ignition on and off, but this will send power to the whole system. I figured out throwing the key switch, so when I tuck these wires for the steering column up nice and tight to the steering column with the zip tie, apparently I put the zip tie around the rod for the key. Works fine now. I chose this location for our relay because these are just some inexpensive relays off of Amazon, and if I should have problems with it, I can bypass this relay by connecting these 2 poles. So just in case there's problems, I want this to be somewhat accessible. I can get through it through here if I need to change it without having to take the whole dash out. And that's why I put it where I'm putting it. I got my relay box all wired, and when this came, all the pins were just in a bag. So all this wiring had to be done. Honestly, it's pretty easy to put together. It was a little bit challenging at first to figure out exactly how you needed to do it. Like, the power for the fuses is a little bit difficult. I just used a really big butt connector and crimped it with my battery cable crimpers and made sure all the wires were nice and tight in there, and then shrink wrapped it real well. And it seems to be working really well. I got all my fuses ran, so I don't have all of them in here yet, but we've got 20 amp fuses on everything except for the ignition, and then the ignition's on this big relay here. And I haven't actually hooked any of these up to anything yet. It's all the wires right there. So I got to figure that mess out next. So now it is time to go ahead and button this up, get it put back on the side of our console there, and then I think I'm gonna call it a night, and I'll get back at this bright and early tomorrow morning. Okay, I'm gonna flip the main switch. Any smoke? Okay, so first test is to see if we have power. This should be grounded now. We have power here. We have power there. We should also have power here. We do. No power there. Now we have power on that side. This means all these fuses should have power. They do. Which means that we should hear the starter relay click. It does. This should turn the red light on. It does. Green light. See that? So that's our ignition switch. It's our fuel pump. That's our water pump. That's our radiator fan. That's our transmission fan. And it's feeding back through the LEDs because the relay's closing and there's not enough load on any of these. Once there's a load on them, it should stop that. And then the last one here is the nitrous, but there's no point in flipping it because it's not going to do anything. It's just going to power this wire over here. It's not hooked up. This one's going to turn a light on in the dash. All of our relays are working, and the reason I know that is because all these lights are not hooked up to the switches. These lights are all hooked up to the output side of the relay. So when this power wire gets power, that's water pump, for instance, now we should have power on this wire here. We do. And when I unplug this, or when I turn it off, no power. Okay. So then this one here, the white wire should be the rad fan, which is this one. It has power. Transmission fan is this one over here. It has power. The fuel pump is the lime green one. It has power. Ignition is the orange one down here. It has power. Okay, now we just need to run all those wires where they go and hook all that up. But our relay box is wired and working properly, as well as our switch panel. So now all these output wires just need to be run where they go. We're good to go. We probably should test is we'll turn the ignition wire on, shuts off with the ignition switch. So everything is dead. The only thing that has power now is that terminal and that one terminal up there. This wire is going to go to our nitrous, and it's hooked up on the output side of the relay. So theoretically, if we turn this on, now we should have power on this. We do. We should also have power on this, and this is just going to go operate the light, and we do. So now if it's hooked up correctly, when I step on the brakes, now the nitrous is not active. Now it is, and the light should stay on either way because it's hooked up to the switch, not to the brakes. You can hear the relay clicking too, so that works. And then I did actually forget to check one other thing, which it's going to be a listen for it thing. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear it, so we'll just test it. Right now we're in park, so our start button works. If we go to reverse, it should no longer work. And it doesn't. Neutral, it should work again. It does. No longer works. It's a little hard on the fingers with no knob on there. Alright, so the switch panel is wired and ready to go. The relay box is wired and ready to go. Now we just got to work on all of our outputs. We've got most of the wiring done inside our console. All this stuff is hooked up to the switch panel, which is over there, and the relay box, which is right there, and goes out to run the various accessories. And if we come over here, you can see they come out the firewall there. This wire runs down the valve cover, goes to the distributor pickup. You can see the plug right there, to the alternator for the ignition and field wire. That doubled back wire there is for the water pump if we get to that point. And then we've got all of our wiring for our nitrous. Micro switch on the side of the carburetor, the power wire coming from the switch. Those two go to the two solenoids, and then the ground is going to be grounded to the intake, where the alternator is also going to be grounded right to the intake. I'll ground the block to the frame over there. We've got our wiring all run for the back, runs inside the frame rail all the way down, and then to the rear end back there. I installed a ground up here, goes from the frame to the body, nice clean points on both ends, so the body or the cab is completely grounded. So anything that's hooked to the cab should have a good solid ground. The last things we have left to wire up are our coil, which goes to the MSD box, so it's not there yet. And then we've got to run a wire from our alternator, output post there, over to our 120 amp relay that is going to be self-energizing. What I mean by that is when you flip the ignition on, the alternator is going to get fielded. Once the alternator is fielded and it starts spinning because the engine starts, it's going to output a 12 volt signal on the battery wire basically. That's going to go back here to this relay. I'm going to hook up the contacts to close the relay to that battery signal from the alternator on one side. The other side is going to go all the way back to the ground switch in the back for the battery cutoff, so that when we throw the ground switch, it breaks the ground here, which opens this relay, which will break our charge wire and stop the alternator from keeping the electronics energized in the truck, so that when you hit the switch in the back, it shuts the truck off. Here's a view of the wiring from under the truck. You can see right there is our wire coming down from the plug out of the firewall. Comes back down here and makes a loop there. This wire goes up to run the reverse lights for the transmission. That's our battery cable there. Then our transmission cooler plugs in right there. There's the transmission cooler. Here's the view of where our fuel pump is going to be mounted and the wiring for the fuel pump. I still have to go ahead and tie this wire up a little bit, but for right now it's just sitting there. Comes around for the tail lights, just the factory plugs for the tail lights. I'm gonna go get to work on finishing the stuff inside with the top of the console. It seems like no matter what I do, whenever I do a wiring job, I always end up with that one place where I'm like, I hope nobody ever sees that. Well, it's inside the console on this one. Okay, I got the fuse panel all installed. You can see I just brought up a ground, the power, and then these go out to all of our various accessories. That's the first one is the wipers, then the turn signals, then the brake lights, and on this side we have the reverse lights in the back. That's all done. So now I need to go out and finish up the alternator wiring and wire up our self-energizing alternator relay. I forgot, I also wired up our MSD box, finished the plug, ran the wire for the coil out there, hooked up the ignition switch to it, and so now that is all on the other side of the firewall as well. All right, so now we have our battery wire hooked up to our alternator. It runs back to our self-energizing relay, and as you can see, I just took a wire off of the battery wire and ran it to one side of the contacts, and this one goes all the way back to our battery, so that this will lose ground when we flip the switch in the back, open this relay, and isolate the alternator so that it can't keep charging, and this wire goes down to our battery connection in the console. And I know that kind of sounds funny because we think we're throwing the ground back there, but since the alternator is grounded here, it would continue charging and make a circuit and basically become the battery that would keep the system running. So we have to get rid of the power side of the alternator and the ground side of the battery at the same time. And that's how I did it. Our fuse panel comes with this cool little cover and all these little stickers. So I'm going to see if I can find stickers for all the different signals we have and put them on here. I forgot to mention, I decided not to use the ground bus because I don't want to run extra wire all over the place. So I just grounded everything close to where it was at. So if you have something turned on and you lose a fuse while it's on, you get that nice little light to let you know that the fuse is what blew. I thought that was a really cool feature. We got our stickers on there. Unfortunately, it didn't come with one for stop lights or brake lights or reverse lights. This is actually meant to be installed in a boat, so maybe they don't include those on boats. I don't know. I don't have one, so we're not putting it on there. All right, that's the last wire we've got to hook up on the taillights. We should be done with the wiring that we can do for now. Let's test it. Thanks for watching. Tune in next week when we finish up the fuel system on this truck and finally get the big block fired up for the first time in months. See you soon.